wanted to talk a little bit about our equipment for our candy making class, specifically for our molded cherry cordials. I've got a number of things here on the counter, and I will be making molded cherry cordials in class. In order to do that, I've got a couple different examples of molds here. This is a very, very inexpensive plastic candy mold, and it is for truffles. It's a truffle mold. So it's not quite as deep, but it would definitely work. This one I just got at Michael's. I believe this might be a Wilton mold, but it's pretty beat up. I've had it for quite some time. So that would absolutely work. So that's an option. You can also get these silicone molds at Michael's, and I have linked to the actual mold right from the prep packet. These ones are, I like the depth of them because they do accommodate a maraschino cherry very nicely. This particular one comes in, I believe it's a cavity of either 12 or 18. I always cut my silicone molds up just because having to deal with a big piece of silicone that is flexy and wobbly when I'm working with chocolate, I don't particularly care for that. So I cut them into sections to make it easier to put the chocolate in, and then using an offset spatula, which you'll need for this class, or any type of edged spatula, I can just easily scrape my chocolate off. And then I can also tap out when I'm coating the mold itself. This is nice. Like I said, this one comes in a big sheet. I have linked it from the prep packet. The other one that Michael's carries is this one right here. So you can see that I've cut this one up as well. This is only got one side of the mold with the balls, and it's definitely a little bit wider. It's kind of more like this mold here in terms of being a little more spread out. This would absolutely work. Just keep in mind though that if you purchase this mold, you only have 3 of the round. You could make these into cordials as well, but just keep in mind if you want them to all be round, you're going to only be working with 3 at a time. Again, I've cut this up because it just makes it easier. So for the class, if you plan to do the molded cherry cordials, which is what I will be making in class, you will need some type of mold. If you do not want to make molded cherry cordials, that is absolutely up to you. You could simply buy maraschino cherries that have a stem and do a dip method where you wrap the fondant around and then dip them. Or if you just buy the regular maraschino cherries that don't have a stem, you could also wrap the fondant around those and use a fork and dip them in chocolate. So those are the options. If you plan to do molded with me in class, here are some options for molds. If you plan to deviate and not use a mold, that is also an option. You'll just need to decide what type of cherries you want to use, whether they have a stem or not. You can absolutely make cherry cordials without a mold. As I stated, you will need some sort of spatula that has a nice edge on it, so you can, if you're doing the molds, you can scrape the chocolate. I like to have a little baking sheet as well. It just makes it easier to transport my molds from the refrigerator back to the counter. A scale comes in handy for weighing out the dry fondant sugar, if that's what I'll talk about this in a minute, but if you opt to use that, a scale is handy for that. Some sort of rolling pin so that you can roll the fondant out when it's time. I like to use a little mesh sieve here, and that's to sift my powdered sugar if you're making the no-cook fondant recipe, which will be in your final prep packet, or if you're using the dry fondant sugar to sift out any lumps. Which brings us to our dry fondant sugar. Like I mentioned, I will be providing 2 recipes for those that do not want to purchase this particular mix. This is powdered sugar with no cornstarch and inverted sugar. And it's what candy makers use to create the delicious centers in candies, as well as the cherry cordials. You can also make a thin icing out of it to do petit fours with. This is that option. There are multiple uses. You can also use it to make peppermint patties, which is delicious. I will be using this in class. However, I have also provided a recipe, which you will be getting 2 days before the start of class date, with the regular powdered sugar version. So don't fear if you don't want to buy this, not to worry, there is an alternative. I will also be using Invertis. If you can find it, great. If you can't, please don't worry about it. What this does, it's a natural occurring enzyme, and it actually breaks the fondant down, which gives you that liquidy center that cherry cordials normally have. Just know that if you can't get access to this, it's fine. You can omit it. It's not required. This mix, the recipe that you'll be getting for this type of fondant is absolutely delicious, as well as the other fondant recipe. They're both equally delicious, so not to fret. All right, you will need some sort of eyedropper if you are using the Invertis. Again, not required. I just kind of wanted to go through those ingredients. You're also going to need parchment paper. You'll need that for a number of the things that we make in this class, so just have that handy. Outside of that, you'll need access for this particular recipe. This does involve heat, so you will need access to either a stovetop or a microwave. And that's really it for the cherry cordials. Wanted to just go through all of these things. Obviously, if you have questions, please email me. For our dark chocolate fudge, you will need a pan. This is a 1.5 quart pan. You're going to need an offset spatula. You are also going to need a piece of parchment paper. You're going to need parchment paper for everything that you make in this candy making class, but for your fudge, you will need a piece of parchment paper. And that is going to be used to create a sling for your dish, your pan here. So this is a 6x6 square pan. You can go all the way up to 8x8. I wouldn't go larger than 8x8 because what will happen is your fudge will become thinner and thinner and thinner. If you like chunky pieces of fudge, then a smaller container like this is the 6x6 would be great. If you want them to be, I would say about an inch thick or a ½ inch to an inch thick, then go with the 8x8. If you go smaller, you just want to make sure that you have walls that will, accommodate the depth of the piece of fudge. This is a pan that the bottom comes out of, but they make them solid as well. So that's pretty much it, aside from the ingredients and the stovetop to make our fudge. Yeah, so if you have any questions, email me about that. As far as our truffles go and the equipment that we will need, I just wanted to step through this very quickly. You are going to need a pot to warm your liquids up in. So this is a 1.5 quart pan. This is perfect. This is the perfect size. You could go smaller if you have a little bit smaller. That's totally fine as well. You'll need a rubber spatula for stirring. You will also need a offset spatula, which is just useful for many things when it comes to making truffles. I've got 2 options here. This is a little melon baller. I use it for making truffles. I love it. It's just the perfect size. However, this is ½ of a tablespoon. So you can use a ½ tablespoon measurer. Works just well. The reason why I like to use something that is consistent is that all of your truffles will be the same size if you choose a size. For class, I feel like a ½ of a tablespoon of the truffle ganache mixture is the perfect bite size, especially once you roll it in either cocoa powder or the sprinkles. It's just perfect. So something to scoop that is at least a half of a tablespoon. A scale if you choose to weigh your ingredients out. You are also going to need unsweetened cocoa powder. This is Dutch cocoa powder. So that's what you want to look for at the grocery store. The ganache mixture is very sweet, so having this little dusting will cut through the sweetness, so to speak. And then as far as sprinkles go, I just have some chocolate sprinkles here. You can really use whatever type of sprinkles you want. Just keep in mind that you want something that isn't super hard, because that would just be kind of weird on the truffles. So something that is whatever you want to do sprinkle wise. And that is it for the equipment. You will need a bowl as well. So I've got some ganache already made up here. You're going to need a bowl with an airtight lid for your ganache. And then also some plastic wrap so that once your ganache sets up, you can push a piece of plastic wrap down onto the ganache itself and then replace your lid, and then you've got it stored properly. Another thing to mention with regards to our truffles is that you're going to want some sort of pan to put these on, to put your truffles on, and you'll need a piece of parchment paper as well. I feel that you could get away with a quarter sheet pan, but if you have a larger one, that's fine as well. You just want to have something that you can put your truffles on and put them into the refrigerator. If you have questions, email me. As far as our candy bark goes, you will need some type of bowl to melt your chocolate in. You'll also need your offset spatula, a piece of parchment paper, and a baking sheet that has a lip on it. So this is a half sheet pan, and that is so that when we go to make our bark, you're going to be spreading it all out on the parchment. So that's why you want a little bit of distance. And that is it for our candy bark. I just wanted to talk very quickly about some of the ingredients. In a previous video, I talked about the dry fondant sugar, that this you can use if you're able to get it. You can use this for our cordial fillings, but I also have alternate recipe for fondant that's basic, so not to worry about that. But this is what it looks like if you are doing the dried fondant. Additionally, I mentioned the invertus. This is what you would use to liquefy the fondant centers and cherry cordials. Again, this is not required, but if you do find that you are going to want to make these in large batches, or you just really get into cherry cordials, then I would recommend that you purchase this. But for our class, it is absolutely optional, just like this is optional, and you will have an alternate recipe. As far as cocoa powder goes on your shopping list, you want one that is unsweetened. So this is a Dutch cocoa powder, which is unsweetened. Chocolate sprinkles. These are what they look like. You don't have to get these. If you want to do some other type of sprinkle, that is totally fine. If you don't want to do sprinkles at all and you just want to do the cocoa powder, also fine. As far as chocolate goes, I have a 60% Ghirardelli dark chocolate chips here. So this is what this looks like. This is a professional bag. Just look for this at the grocery store, the 60%. They come in smaller bags. And this is what I am using for the chocolate fudge as well as for the ganache, which the ganache is for our truffles. So that's what that looks like. Also in the Ghirardelli family, these are our dark chocolate flavored melting wafers. So this is a coating chocolate, and this is what we're going to use to fill our molds for our cordials, or if you're going to be dipping them, you'll use this as well. And this is what it looks like. For our Bark, we're going to be using for our candy bark, we're going to be using the white version of this, so the white chocolate coating compound, or melting wafers, or candy melts, whatever you want to call them. They go by many, many names. If you can't find either of these, you could also use almond bark, white and chocolate. That works as well. Any sort of melting wafers, if you go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby or Ben Franklin, they also sell the candy melts, is what they're typically called, in a craft store. Sweet Tooth Fairy is a brand. Wilton is a brand. Those are the options. Ghirardelli tastes, in my opinion, for a coating compound, Ghirardelli, or even if you go to Winco, they sell white and dark coating compound, Guittard in the bulk foods. Going to be better than a Wilton candy melt. So that's my spiel on that. If you have questions about these two, please email me. And then this is the toffee bits that we'll be using on our ice cream sundae candy bark. These are the English toffee bits. These are just the bits. They're not coated in chocolate. For the candy bark, if you end up with the ones that have the chocolate on it, that's totally fine. Not a big deal. And that's really it in terms of like the specialty ingredients that I just wanted to kind of walk you through. As always, if there are other questions about ingredients on the shopping list, please email me. See you in class.